some in the Democratic establishment are continuing the narrative that it was Bernie Sanders that cost Hillary Clinton the election to Donald Trump. Now, that narrative, of course, is nothing new. That's been going on since November. What's new is that now they're claiming that they have data to back it up. So let's take a look at that. Now, this evidence is being shown in a piece that's been widely distributed to different outlets and was written by Jason Lemire. Now, in it, he claims, thanks to a study, that a significant portion of Sanders supporters voted for Trump in key states that ended up costing Hillary Clinton the election, and therefore, it's the Bernie Sanders and Bernie bros' fault. Okay. Now, the data, I'm not discounting the data. The data is, from what I can see, is real. Now, Lemire writes, according to the analysis of the 2016 Cooperative Congressional Elections Survey, fewer than 80% of those who voted for Sanders, an independent, in the Democratic primary did the same for Clinton when she faced off against Trump a few months later. So you've got 80% here, right? 80% of people who voted for Sanders also voted for Hillary Clinton in the general election. But now his main point is, but you had that 12% that voted for Trump. See, that 12% of Bernie Sanders supporters that voted for Trump, it's all their fault. Oh, dear God. 12% of Bernie Sanders supporters voted for Trump. That means all Bernie Sanders people are awful and that Bernie Sanders himself is to blame. That is ridiculous. Okay. Now, he goes on to say that the impact of those votes, that 12%, was very significant. In each of the 3 states that ultimately swung the election for Trump, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, Trump's margin of victory over Clinton was smaller than the number of Sanders voters who gave him their vote. And again, they point out some numbers. Now, this is from G. Elliott Morris, who tweeted out the numbers, right, from Sanders to Trump voters. Now, that's Wisconsin is 51,000 voters, Michigan 47,000, and in Pennsylvania about 116,000 voters went from Sanders to Trump. Trump's win margin in Wisconsin was 22,000, in Michigan it was 10,000, and in Pennsylvania was 44,000. Oh my God, see? If it weren't for those goddamn Bernie bros, Hillary Clinton, she'd be president right now, and we beat Trump. Look, again, I don't dispute those numbers. What I dispute is laying the blame at the feet of Bernie Sanders and the millions of people who did vote for him. And that's unfortunately how this data is being spun. Look, even Lemire, to an extent, spins this data, but not explicitly, right? Now, he writes in this article, while the self-confessed socialist Sanders and the America First embracing Trump represent polar opposites on the ideological spectrum, how kind of you to point that out, by the way. We've seen a lot of people saying, oh, they're the same, they're the same. Really? They're the same? Not so much. Now, he says they both carried an outsider message and appealed to voters frustrated with the state political establishment. And that is true. Now, although Sanders railed against the policies and rhetoric offered up by Trump, the Republican at times sought to reach out to Sanders voters, emphasizing the similarities of the two candidates' positions on issues like trade. And he offers a tweet from Trump. He said, sad to watch Bernie Sanders abandon his revolution. We welcome all voters who want to fix our rigged system and bring back jobs. Now, he further adds that the data would suggest that Trump's efforts were at least in part successful. Now, again, go back to the data here, right? 12% of Sanders voters went for Trump. 80% went for Clinton. I think it's a stretch to call that successful, especially considering that a lot of these people weren't going to vote for Hillary anyway. Now, Lemire points out that of those who switched their allegiance from Sanders to Trump, less than 10% actually considered themselves strong Democrats, while less than 50% even lean Democrat. So again, 1 in 10 considered themselves strong Democrats, yet over half were either likely moderates or conservatives. Now, doesn't that instead show broad appeal for Bernie Sanders? Yes, it does. Of course it does. Look, what this data actually presents is a stronger case for Bernie Sanders, not a weaker one. And it's something that, look, we on the progressive side, we've been saying this all along, right? Sanders, he's able to attract independents. He's able to attract people even on the conservative side in a way that Hillary Clinton was never and could never have been able to do. And you know why? It's because he actually offered a message of change. Those 12% of Sanders voters who went Trump, look, they were not likely, as I keep saying, to vote for Hillary Clinton. Even if Sanders had never run, they would not have voted for Hillary Clinton. She was weaker with independents. She did worse. And of course, there were very, very few Republicans that were ever going to vote for her, despite Donald Trump being an absolute disaster. And of course, this goes into their strategy. And we've talked about this before. They knew Clinton was a weak Democratic candidate and a terrible campaigner. So what they did is that they elevated Trump with what they called a Pied Piper strategy. They thought that if we just take one of these crazy people from the fringe right and we elevate them, put them in the news media, then they're going to be so reviled that somebody like Hillary Clinton is going to win. I mean, this candidate is so hideous that they're going to have to vote for Hillary, right? In fact, this is summed up with Chuck Schumer saying last summer that for every blue-collar Democrat we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we will pick up 2 moderate Republicans in the suburbs in Philadelphia. And you could repeat that in Ohio and Illinois and Wisconsin. How'd that turn out? Not very well. The hubris of this campaign doomed us all. And so these people who are blaming Bernie, it's funny, they seem to think that the 12% who voted for Bernie and went to Trump, that they were owed that 12%. They don't understand anything about politics. Look, the way that you're supposed to run a campaign is that you try to go out and get people's votes. You are not owed anything. And again, that goes to the hubris, right? Now, Lemire also writes that during the campaign, Sanders was criticized by many in the Democratic establishment for taking his primary battle with Clinton all the way into the summer. The Vermont senator did, though, ultimately endorse Clinton and campaign on her behalf. At the same time, leaked emails suggested that the DNC undermined Sanders' efforts during the campaign. No, not suggested. They definitely screwed over Bernie Sanders, and that helped lead to Donald Trump. Now, finally, he writes, while much was made of the so-called Bernie or bust phenomenon, the number of Sanders supporters who crossed party lines to vote for Trump in 2016 may not have actually been that unusual. So here they create this entire case, right? That, oh my God, these 12% Bernie Sanders could have made these people vote for Hillary Clinton, or had he not been there, they would have voted for Hillary Clinton and not Donald Trump. Oh, but by the way, this is not an unusual phenomenon. So yes, they probably would have voted for Trump anyway. So they undermine the complete argument. In fact, a 2010 study in Public Opinion Quarterly found that the 2008 election, 25% of those who voted for Clinton in the Democratic primary ended up voting for John McCain rather than Barack Obama in the general election. So, again, that article, it undermines itself and the entire premise that it was somehow the fault of Bernie Sanders and his supporters for Clinton losing the election. And yet, I can see this article being used to put a hatchet in the back of Bernie Sanders. But see, Sanders didn't make the DNC screw him over, rig the primary against him, right? Bernie Sanders didn't make Clinton run a terrible campaign that offered no vision and no change. Bernie Sanders didn't make Hillary Clinton not campaign in Michigan and Wisconsin. Bernie Sanders wasn't responsible for making sure that all of his voters voted for her. And furthermore, even though it's not his responsibility, he tried and convinced over 3/4 of his voters to vote for her anyway. 80%. He did everything that he could do to avoid Donald Trump. And look, other than be the nominee, he did everything that he could do. If he was the nominee, he would have crushed Donald Trump. If anyone should take the majority of the blame for Hillary Clinton losing the election to Trump, it's the DNC and Hillary Clinton. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.